UN Secretary General sounds alarm over climate change. Mexico grants emergency authorization for the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine candidate. And hundreds of Nigerian students missing after armed attack on high school. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. Heads of state and government from over 70 countries have held a virtual gathering to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, the international pact aimed at curbing global warming. The administration of outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump, who pulled Washington out of the Paris Accord, wasn't represented at the online gathering, but President-elect Joe Biden made clear the U.S. will join again. Also absent were major economies such as Australia, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Most have offered no significant improvements on their existing emissions targets lately. The Paris Agreement aims to cap global warming at well under 2 Celsius, ideally no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has called climate change a human issue at the Climate Ambition Summit.
Europe only accounts for less than 10% of global emissions. Climate change is more than a European issue. It is a human issue. And today there is a global movement for climate action, a movement that counts on powerful nations, but also on countless cities, NGOs, people of goodwill. Europe wants to contribute to the movement and make it grow. We want to work with all those who agree that we must put a price on carbon.
Chinese President Xi Jinping told the virtual climate summit that his country would work to reduce its emissions by 65% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. He said that renewables would account for 25% of China's primary energy consumption by 2030, and it would aim to have 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity installed by then.
I announced that China would increase its national determined contributions, adopt stronger policies and measures, and strive to reach peak carbon dioxide emissions by 2030, and strive to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Here I will further announce that by 2030, China's carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP will drop by more than 65% from the 2005 level, and non-fossil fuels will account for about 25% of primary energy consumption. The forest stock volume will be increased by 6 billion cubic meters from the 2005 level. The total installed capacity of wind power and solar power will hit over 1.2 billion kilowatts.
United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has urged world leaders to declare a state of climate emergency and shape greener growth after the coronavirus pandemic as he opened a summit, or the summit, marking 5 years since the landmark Paris Agreement. Over the last 5 years, wildfires in the Amazon, Australia and America, floods in the Philippines, hurricanes in the Caribbean, and record temperatures in the Arctic have highlighted the impact an increase of 1.2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times is already having on the planet.
5 years after Paris, we are still not going in the right direction. Paris promised to limit temperature rise to as close as to 1.5 degrees as possible. But the commitments made in Paris were far from enough to get there, and even those commitments are not being met. And so, the central objective of the United Nations for 2021 is to build a truly global coalition for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century. But that promise is not enough. To make it a reality, we need meaningful cuts now to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030 compared with 2010 levels. And this must be fully reflected in the revised and strengthened nationally determined contributions that the Paris signatories are obliged to submit well before COP26 next year in Glasgow.
Meanwhile, Chile's President Sebastián Piñera has called on all countries to set net zero goals.
Today, I want to call on the heads of state and government in attendance. We must all move steadily towards development models that are low in emissions and commit to zero net emissions as soon as possible. If we want to keep global temperatures rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, current carbon emissions must be reduced by at least 45%, almost by half, in the next 10 years, and we must achieve carbon neutrality by 2050.
And on the eve of the anniversary of the signing of the climate change agreement, the Caribbean community hosted the CARICOM Moment of Ambition, where Secretary General Erwin LaRocque lamented that the region cannot afford to mitigate the catastrophic consequences of climate change, especially amidst the pandemic. As such, he said urgent measures are needed for CARICOM states to access aid for post-COVID-19 and climate recovery.
As CARICOM, we continue to advocate for policy options and urgent measures to finally address access issues in the context of COVID recovery, climate change, and development. In this regard, we urge the international community to expand the criteria for access to grant and concessionary finance and debt relief initiatives. A universal vulnerability index must be established to determine such access. It is our sincere hope that the next 5 years will be characterized by developing new financial instruments. These should include debt for climate swaps and grant-based financing for specific initiatives. Renewed attention to mobilizing partnerships with the private sector and addressing options for finance to support regional responses to loss and damage are also of importance.
On February 4th, a Jamaican judge will disclose whether former Education Minister Ruel Reid, President of the Caribbean Maritime University Professor Fritz Pinnock, and others will go to trial for fraud. Chief Judge of the Parish Courts, Chester Crooks, made the announcement on Friday after a defense attorney urged him to dismiss the matter since the accused were arrested by officers of the Financial Investigations Division, which had no jurisdiction to do so. In October 2019, police charged Reid, his wife Sharon, and daughter Sherelle, Pinnock, and Councillor Kim Brown Lawrence of the ruling Jamaica Labour Party over allegations of financial improprieties in which funds were supposedly siphoned from CMU and the Ministry of Education. They are all out on bail.
Because anytime you...
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Hundreds of pupils are missing after bandits armed with assault rifles attacked a secondary school in Nigeria's northwestern Katsina state late on Friday. A senior police officer told journalists that the gunmen stormed the government science secondary school in Kankara district at about 9:40 p.m. and police at the scene returned fire, allowing some students to run to safety. He added that law enforcement is working with the military to determine the exact number of students that are missing or kidnapped in an effort to find them. Katsina, the home state of President Muhammadu Buhari, is plagued by violent bandits who often attack civilians and carry out kidnappings. War refugees from Ethiopia's besieged Tigray region have received the first consignment of aid relief. The International Committee of the Red Cross delivered relief supplies in the capital Mekelle in the past weeks. Access to Tigray has been restricted since fighting began, making it difficult to hand over aid to thousands of refugees. The relief comes as the United Nations had expressed concern over the plight of nearly 100,000 Eritrean refugees in Tigray who had appealed for urgent aid.
The worst for medical personnel, for the health staff in hospitals and primary healthcare centers, is to be unable to help, is to be unable to provide support due to lack of material, due to lack of assistance, and to lack of stocks. And that's indeed what we're trying and hoping to achieve by bringing much needed assistance into a region that saw a full lockdown since weeks now.
Staying in Africa, thousands of displaced Mozambicans who fled the Islamist insurgency in the north of the country are faced with a serious humanitarian catastrophe. due to a lack of food and poor living conditions. The International Organization for Migration has acknowledged that families living in camps in Cabo Delgado are housed in deplorable conditions, adding that humanitarian organizations are finding difficulty channeling aid to the area due to the ongoing conflict. About 500,000 people have been forced from their homes by jihadist militants who have so far killed more than 2,400 people.
Conditions are unbearable. Many people are sleeping on the floor, especially those over here. They haven't received tents, blankets, pants. They have only got food. That's it.
In terms of support, usually we have a few sectors that are regularly mentioned and are reflecting the needs on the ground. So clearly access to food, water, clean water is key, access to shelter, access to household items. These are really sectors and the support that is regularly requested by internally displaced persons.
Political parties in the Central African Republic have started scaling up campaigns ahead of general elections set for the end of this month. The incumbent president, FAUSTIN ARCHANGE TOUADERA, held his first rally in the capital, Bangui, where he pledged to bring peace to a country ravaged by more than 7 years of civil war. This month's ballot will be the second since conflict broke out in 2013 when Muslim Seleka rebel alliance fought with Christian anti-Balaka militia. Armed groups still control much of the country despite a peace agreement signed almost 2 years ago.
In 4 years, we have invested in meeting the security challenge, which is the major problem in this country. And gradually, everything is getting better. The return of security to the Central African Republic concerns us all. My determination and that of the government was reflected in the signing of the peace agreement to bring peace to the Central African Republic.
Shifting gears now, the Mexican government has granted emergency authorization for the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This week, the government announced it would begin the vaccination process at the end of this month, with the first batch of 250,000 set to immunize 125,000 people, since the full dose requires 2 shots.
Mexico is the fourth country whose health regulatory agency, COFEPRIS, has granted emergency use authorization to the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine against the SARS-CoV-2 virus for the prevention of COVID-19. This is certainly a reason for hope of tranquility. We are already prepared to issue the purchase order. Throughout this moment, we have been in close conversation with Pfizer, so that Pfizer grants it, and once the purchase order is made, Pfizer reconstitutes the product or conditions it for 8 days, as it's called technically, and sends it. The distribution points have been defined.
Staying in Mexico, archaeologists have excavated more sections of an extraordinary Aztec tower of human skulls under Mexico City. The country's National Institute of Anthropology and History said a further 119 skulls had been uncovered. The tower was discovered in 2015 during the restoration of a building in the capital. It is believed to be part of a skull rack from the temple to the Aztec god of the sun, war, and human sacrifice. For the first time in its history, Bolivia's civil registry has authorized a same-sex civil union following a 2-year legal battle. David Aruquipa, a 48-year-old businessman, and Guido Montano, a 45-year-old lawyer, were initially denied the right to register their union in 2018 by authorities who said the country's laws did not allow same-sex marriage. While the constitution still does not permit same-sex unions, the couple argued successfully that the prohibition violated international human rights standards and constituted discrimination under the nation's laws.
It is a historical event. We are in a WhatsApp group of more than 300 activists. At the national level, there are some representatives who are here today. But just that next step, we know that this situation, and that's why it's only a half happiness. This situation benefits us both. enables our registration, but this is not yet open to all the gay and lesbian population. Our rights have historically been excluded. So I am 40 years old. So for 40 years, I have had to work to transform my family.
We're taking one last break, but don't go away. Welcome back. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has welcomed recommendations from U.S. experts who have granted emergency approval for Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine candidate.
The FDA committee recommended emergency use authorization for Pfizer's BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. But we're grateful for the scientists at these, not only there, but other great organizations, researchers who developed this vaccine and several others on the way. And we're just as grateful to the scientists and the public experts who evaluated its safety and efficiency free from political influence. I want to make it clear to the public, you should have confidence in this. There is no political influence. These are first-rate scientists taking their time looking at all of the elements that need to be looked at. Scientific integrity led us to this point.
Furthermore, U.S. citizens are set to start receiving the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine from Monday, according to General Gus Perna, head of the distribution operation.
We expect 145 sites across all the states to receive vaccine on Monday, another 425 sites on Tuesday, and the final 66 sites on Wednesday, which will complete the initial delivery of the Pfizer orders for vaccine.
British farmers have expressed concern over Brexit uncertainty as the end of the transition period draws near. A farmer from South England said there are fears that so many things could go wrong, adding that the uncertainty caused by the drawn-out Brexit saga is making it difficult to plan ahead. The new round of Brexit talks are set to resume on Sunday as Britain prepares to move out of the European Union Single Market and Customs Union. The post-Brexit transition period ends on December 31st.
There's so many things that could change. The problem is we don't really know. The things that are going to really hurt, the things we won't see beforehand. We know about the paperwork, we know about the extra cost, we know about the delays at the ports, but it's the things we don't know about that will probably do the most damage. But there could be so many things. A shortage of lorry drivers, could paralyse the economy. There's so many things that could go wrong, but we just don't know. We're obviously seeing a big change now of leaving the CFP, moving to a UK and English policy. It's clear we'll be supporting much less as farmers. There'll be much more money towards the environment and much less towards food production. That's going to have an impact, but we will keep farming. It won't stop us. It may stop a lot of people. It may be the difference between keeping farming and not for many farmers.
Protests against the controversial global security law have continued for the third weekend in a row in the French capital, Paris. Demonstrations erupted after the government introduced a security bill in Parliament that is meant to increase surveillance and restrict the circulation of images of police officers in the media and online. The bill has been viewed as part of President Emmanuel Macron's bid to strengthen law and order ahead of elections scheduled for 2022. At least 6 Russian law enforcement officers were injured in the country's south on Friday when a suicide bomber blew himself up near a local office of the Federal Security Service, or FSB. According to local media, an explosive device first went off outside the FSB office without hurting anyone. However, when law enforcement gathered to inspect the site, the suicide bomber approached them and detonated explosives, killing himself and injuring 6 others. The identity of the attacker is yet to be established. Indian police have stopped farmers from blocking major highways and taking over more roads leading into the capital as a 2-week campaign against market reform laws intensifies. The strike follows 5 rounds of talks between farmers and the government that have failed to produce any breakthroughs. The demonstrators are protesting reforms that they say could devastate crop prices and reduce their earnings. They say the laws will lead the government to stop buying grain at the minimum guaranteed cost and result in exploitation by corporations that will push prices down.
Now, they are not allowing new farmers to join the protest. They are all being stopped along the route. Wherever farmers are trying to come together in large numbers to protest, they are being blocked. This is all an attempt by the government to quash the farmer protests.
On that note, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I am Doris Polo. Have a good night.